رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to another episode of Salaam Youth. I know it's been a bit of a while since the last episode, but alhamdulillah we're back. Inshallah, episode will start off a new revival for the channel, and I've mainly been busy with uni, but part of that's just me being lazy as well, or most of it, but inshallah we'll get back into it. Today's a very special episode, I think a very relevant episode. Right now, around April, May time is when many sixth form students or college students will start to get their university applications in and their offers coming in from universities. So a lot of Muslim students are thinking about how am I going to balance my faith in the context of university? What are some of the challenges I'm going to face? How am I going to tackle them? Who are the people that I can turn to? So, alhamdulillah, we've got an amazing guest today, Sheikh Mustafa, who I'm going to pass over to introduce himself, and we'll be talking about this topic in more detail.
Jazakallah Khayrun, barakallahu feekum, حفظكم. Thanks so much for the introduction and most of the work that you're doing, Arab. Okay, I'll quickly introduce myself then. So, my name is Mustafa. Just to get a bit of a background about me in terms of seeing us talking about university, I first set foot in university as a pharmacy student, which was a 4-year degree. After I did that, I did a degree in Sharia, which was 3 years. I then did a master's at Islamic Studies, which was 2 years. And then ever since then, I've basically been involved with university students. Right now, I'm head of education at an institute called Roots Academy, and we teach Islamic studies on campus. I'm also a chaplain at Birmingham University, and I teach Islamic studies at a Islamic college called the Birmingham College of Humanities. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And Jazakallah Khayrun for having me on your channel.
Jazakallah Khayrun. And I'll just input a quick plug in for Roots, inshallah. I can say firsthand, if you are going to a university that has Roots, be sure to attend every single workshop because I can say
Jazakallah
firsthand, especially for Sheikh Mustafa, we've got a very good instructor and the funniest instructor as well.
Khayrun.
But inshallah, let's get into it. So, first question
Bismillah.
we have is a more general question. So, what are some of the biggest challenges facing a Muslim youth in university from what you've seen?
Do you know, in terms of these questions, we can say they're quick questions, just start off with, and it guess it depends
Yeah,
on how deep you want to kind of go in terms of issues. I mean, look, let's start off with, I guess the problems, like you said, in terms of a Muslim student. One thing people have to understand, you started off the podcast talking about sixth formers. When you go into university, it's a completely different world. In sixth form, you almost live in a kind of bubble, in a sense, in terms of life is very much you're in like similar circles, and there's a time of routine. When you go to university, it's like all the doors are open. Maybe you're not living at home anymore. Even if you are living at home, your parents have no idea what your schedule's like. No idea. Back in sixth form, they would know what time you start, what time you finish. University, they have no idea what you're doing. You don't even know what your schedule is every week. Never mind your parents. Maybe you're living out. Every single door is open, and you have such a diverse setting in university. You have everything, absolutely everything. Things that people you've never met before from different backgrounds you could have never even imagined. So the biggest challenge is this massive openness when once upon a time things were closed, and all of these different ideas, temptations, people, and they're all kind of calling you. Yeah, and Freshers Week is a week where every single society is trying to tell what kind of what opportunities are available for you, and that's where the journey begins from university. In terms of you are pulled in directions that you've never been pulled in before, whether that's going out in terms of partying, whether that's all sorts of things. So yeah, I think what the biggest challenge is you now have complete independence, an independence that you've never ever had before, in ways that you never ever had before, meeting people you've never ever had before, with ideas you've never ever had before. And that cocktail, I always say, whoever goes into university, you'll never exit the same person. You'll always change in terms of university journey. So yeah, I think that's like a round answer.
and alhamdulillah, I'm very happy that you actually said that as an answer because it links very nicely into our next question.
Yes.
So the second question is, how can students keep themselves responsible when it comes to their actions, behavior, and faith, despite the newfound freedom that they have from university?
Nice. So how can they keep them? Did you say responsible? Did you say? Sorry.
Yes. How can they,
Okay.
yeah, keep themselves responsible?
Nice. I mean, look, I guess my one kind of way to keep yourself grounded, yeah, Responsible is maybe a tough a tough ask for university students. But let's say to keep yourself grounded, which is important. I'd say to keep yourself grounded. I remember, before I went to university, I won't say what year, so not give away my age, but I remember before I went to university, somebody gave me some advice before I got there, and it's golden advice, and I would give this advice to anybody going to university, and that is, before I even started, they told me find the ISOC, make sure you go and find the Islamic Society, and go and spend time with them. And why is that golden advice? Even though I have no idea what university you're going to go to, I'll tell you why. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Al-mar'u ma'a man ahab," that the person is going to be with the person that he loves, and also. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalili." The person's on the religion of his khalil. Khalil doesn't just mean friend. Khalil means your boy, your BFF. Yeah, that's what Khalil means. The point being is, in terms of your university time, and nor am I saying that everyone in ISOC is like really religious and everyone who's not in ISOC isn't really religious. That's not the case. But what you can say is, generally speaking, you can say as a general norm, people who are involved in Islamic society, more often than not, at least are searching for or striving for some sort of deeper relationship with a creator, right? Now, I'm not saying that these people are perfect. I'm saying that they don't sin, and far from it, far from it. But at the very least, I'd say there's a consciousness there that is generally going to be present in terms of, at least there's a striving towards good. Now, that's so important because when you're going about this journey alone, and you, like I said at the very beginning, you have all these different people who are calling you one way. When you have somebody with you who is also trying to search for something better, they're going to keep you grounded. And when you're going to be tempted to go and do every single thing that you're called to go and do, you have that person who's hoping to ground you. And that's why even, today's the Friday of Friday. I don't know if you're going to release this today, but today's the day of Friday. And on the day of Friday, we always recite Surah Al-Kahf, or that's a common practice that's done. Because it's a surah that's supposed to protect you from fitan, from trials. And in the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُم بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. Be patient with those people that call upon Allah. يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. They're seeking His pleasure, right? So what you've got to try and do is try and find those people. Those people who are seeking, yuridun, they want. I'm not saying they've reached it, but they want it. They're seeking, they're searching for it. And a good place to start is something like the Islamic Society, where at least you can have people that can try and ground you. And when you do want to try and fly away, they're keeping you down and trying to keep you responsible, grounded in terms of different temptations. So yeah.
I think that's it's exactly my approach when it came to university as well. Coming from Derby, where in my year group,
Mhm.
in especially in secondary school, where there are only two or three Muslim students,
Yeah.
the Muslim Brotherhood was something I really wanted to strengthen in my own circle because pretty much all of my friends were non-Muslims coming
Yeah.
into university. And I remember I made the dua for a Siddiqui, a righteous friend, and alhamdulillah through the ISOC and all the just Birmingham itself as well, made so many Muslim friends, so many brothers, people I can actually spend time in. And this is one thing I noticed as well, like because your schedules align so much more with Muslim friends compared to
Mm.
non-Muslim friends, you don't feel that guilt. Sometimes you're like, when you're with your non-Muslim mates, you're like, oh, sorry, I can't go to this bar or to this pub because
Yeah.
it's against my religion. Sorry, I can't go
Exactly.
at this time because I have to go pray.
Exactly.
So you feel a sense of guilt. But when you're with your Muslim friends, they not
100%.
only like support that, but they elevate that as well because they
Yeah.
can encourage you towards that as well. And
100%.
it'll link in with the next
100%.
question actually as well. Especially for me in my context, when I came to Birmingham and because of the ISOC, because of the Muslim Brotherhood, because of all the different programs the Masajid have, with like GLM, for example, Green Lane, all the workshops, the lectures, the classes, there's such a, it's like the most opportune environment to nourish your deen. However, when we come back to our environments, when I come back to Derby, for example, during the holidays from uni, I'm sort of coming from a spiritual high, and then I come back to Derby, and I
Yeah.
that environment's no longer there. So, what would
Yeah.
your advice be to those students who are in a similar situation? They might be international students who have come from a
Mm.
country where Islam isn't as predominant. What would
Yeah.
your advice be to them to make sure that they can maintain that level of iman that they had in university when they were thriving with the ISOG, Masajid, etc.?
No, it's a nice question. It's a nice question. Look, let's take some principles. The first principle is that Iman sometimes feels higher and sometimes feels lower. right? Which is why even when, the famous incident of Hanbala, one of the companions, that he says when he's with the Prophet ﷺ, he feels like his iman is so high, and he's complaining, and he says, "Nafaqa Hanbala, yeah." Hanbala's become a hypocrite. Then when he goes to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, famous incident, and then Abu Bakr says, "I feel the same way that you feel," and then they go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Sa'atun wa sa'a. There's an hour for this and an hour for that. The point being is, of course, the Prophet ﷺ isn't around anymore, but those highs are still there. This is something that's natural and normal, right? In terms of that, when you're around righteous people, and like you said, masajid and courses or whatever, naturally, it's a high. Yeah. Now, um, you're not always going to have that spiritual high. It's not possible. Yeah, as Prophet says, there's an hour for this, an hour for that. It's not possible. What we're supposed to strive to do is, as much as possible, try and elevate it to the best of our ability. What that means is, as much as possible, trying to have righteous company, as much as possible, try and be in the right kind of places and the right kind of things. Even though you're never going to it's never constantly going to constantly be high. That's just not the way how we operate, and that's fine. Yeah, that's normal. Um, so I mean, look, in terms of advice. Um, like you said, Birmingham is a special place, and maybe other major cities are like that. That there's so much happening, and there's one discussion about, especially when somebody really feels. I mean, I'll give it a good example actually. Once there was one person who was actually shouldn't, and they were in a completely different country. I won't name the country because I don't want to get back to them, but and they were in a completely different country, and they were saying that they're really struggling in terms of their religion, like really struggling. There's no Muslims here. There's just nothing here. They were on a exchange trip, part of their university degree, and they said, like, I'm really struggling. My advice actually to them was, I think you need to come back. Because if you're getting to the point where, like, I can't even pray anymore, like, there's just everything seems to be sucked out because of my environment, there's no Muslim, there's just nothing here, then, it gets to a point when you actually have to start to think. That's why this whole institution of hijrah, yeah, I don't want to get into the whole fiqh of hijrah right now, that's not the point. But the point is if you get to a point where you're actually struggling to practice your religion due to your environment, the discussion of should I be moving places has to be there. That could be hijrah to Birmingham. Yeah, if that means that you're going to have a higher iman, yeah, you can clip that. That'll be a funny clip. Yeah, and then because the point is you're supposed to be in a place where you can practice your religion and you can, view your religion. Now, sure, there's different places and different things like that. What I would say is, um, uh, I'm sure every community has some sort of activity, and with regards to these kind of things, if you want to go far, you've got to do it in kind of a communal spirit. So trying to find what's available in terms of your locality and trying engaging with that and trying to work in terms of your society is definitely a way to, um, uh, even if we can't hit those highs, we still have highs. And it's not just complete lows for the rest of our life. But yeah,
And I think a good point is also like we come with that spiritual high, for example, in my case from Birmingham. What's to
yeah,
say that we can't try and influence that in our own communities, in our own
of
cities,
course.
especially when we have the knowledge and the motivation that we had? Like, for example, in Derby, there's not really a big Dawah scene in Derby. There is like
Yeah,
the belief, for example, in the masajid or amongst like the
yeah,
Pakistani communities, but there's not like a general Dawah scene. Like, you don't have any Dawah stores in the city centre or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
And after my time in Birmingham, I've been talking with my imam, and we're going to try and organize some sort of network between the masajid that turn
Amazing.
by turn they can set up some sort of dawah store. And it wouldn't just
Nice.
be one masajid leading it, which could cause controversy or anything like that,
No,
but
amazing,
something like
mashallah.
involves the community. So things
Amazing,
like that, we can
amazing.
always take something from our spiritual
100%.
highs, from our environments to our home
Definitely.
environments as well.
Without a shadow of a doubt, yeah. Amazing. Yeah, good.
Um,
Amazing, mashallah.
And if we like zoom into the aspect of when we are in our environments in university with the ISOC, etc., and we're
Yeah.
seeking knowledge, how important is it to seek knowledge in Islam alongside your degree? And how can we navigate it? So, for example, should we have a more passive approach where we put a degree first, or should we put our Islamic studies first over our degree?
Okay. I get this in itself could be a whole hour lecture in terms of studying knowledge. What does it mean at university? How do we like balance that? And I don't want to like take like so much time. I'll try and be like generic. Okay, look, step number one, not every single person needs to be an Islamic scholar. That's just a first principle. Allah says in the Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. Allah says that there needs to be a group of people that go لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ, that they have a tafaqquh, they have an understanding in terms of religion. That's not everybody, that's a group of people. So Do I have to become an Islamic scholar while I'm at university? The answer is no. However, learning is something that every single person should be doing. Yeah, every single person should be engaged in their own type of spiritual journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that has to start with knowledge. It has to start with knowledge because if you don't know what you're doing, and if you're just doing things and you actually have no idea what you're doing, then that's a problem. And I can tell you from somebody who's a chaplain, someone who's been teaching university students for a while, there is um, uh, people don't realize how much they don't know. Sometimes there are such essential things that people just have no idea about. So don't think, oh, it's okay. He's not referring to me. No, no, I probably am referring to you in terms of that there is an essential level that we need to try and get to, and the more that we learn, the better. The more that we learn, the better, and that's why the thing that the first revelation to the Prophet ﷺ was iqra, was read. Okay, so the next question then comes in. Okay, so I don't have to be a scholar now, but I should still be in my own personal development journey in terms of learning. How do I do that alongside university? Let me tell you one thing. I don't accept people to tell me that university is so busy that I don't have time for stuff. I don't accept that. I've been to university for long enough to know that's not true. And I've been around university students enough. I don't care what degree you're doing. Don't tell me I'm doing medicine and this and that. You don't know. No, I know. And it's a lie to say that I haven't got time. You have got time. You absolutely have got time. The question is how are you going to spend your time? That's the question. Are you going to spend your time in the coffee shop? Are you going to spend your time? And that's okay. I'm not saying don't go to the coffee shop. Or are you going to spend your time, binge watching Netflix? How many series have you watched in the past, or how many movies? There is definitely time. It's just about, or have a look at open up your phone and see on your settings how much time you spent on your smartphone. You absolutely have time. Definitely university. It's after you start getting a full-time job and wife and kids, that's when it gets a bit more difficult. So I think university is a great time to study. How should one go about that? What I would strongly advise people to do is rather than trying to go about it alone, trying to enroll in some sort of course is a good way of doing it because it keeps you grounded, it keeps you structured, and it keeps you engaged with something. And people have different capabilities, and there's different courses for different levels for different people in terms of different seriousness, and you find a course that's good for you. We obviously, as part of Roots, we wanted to create this essentials course on campus. If that's your level, fine. If you can go to a level that's above that and you can find some sort of institute to enroll in, even better. But I would say the best way to do it is because why? Because again, you're going to be with a group of people now. You're going to have motivation in terms of there's a group. You're going to have some sort of curriculum that you're going through, and then that can be the first step. It doesn't mean you're going to be an Islamic scholar, but it's just that you're going for your own personal development. Yeah, Allah knows best.
Alhamdulillah, I think Roots is like the perfect example of that. It's not like when you come into a Roots session, you're not expected to be a Hafiz, you're not expected to have this deep understanding. In like sort of like the opposite, Roots asks for you to use what you already know, like the skills that you might developed in school in terms of critical thinking, etc., to use those as an approach. I think the recent series that we had in Roots with reflecting on the Quran was a perfect example of that. We're not asked to be ulama in terms of we have the context of ahadith, etc., to interpret these verses. We're just asked to interpret them with our worldly context and try
Yeah,
and use that. So I think knowledge is something that's very accessible to everyone as Muslim
yeah,
students, and there's different levels to that as well.
exactly.
And each Muslim can assign themselves to that
Yeah,
level.
exactly, exactly, exactly.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, next question. Now we're going to get into more specifics, inshallah.
That's
So,
okay.
what would your advice be to Muslim students who are struggling to fit into their classes, social groups, etc., because of their Muslim identity? So, similar to what we were talking about with having friends who are drinking, go to pubs, etc.
Nice. So I guess there's two things. Number one, it's not always good to fit in. That's the first thing. Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا فطوبى للغرباء. The Prophet ﷺ said that Islam began as something strange and it will return as something strange. So glad tidings to the strangers. So if you can't fit in, glad tidings to you. It's not necessarily always a bad thing that you can't fit in. Definitely university, especially in your first year, especially in your first when I call the first and second year like your discovery years. When you get to your final year, you kind of know who you are by then. But the first second year is normally like a discovery year, and I would say in your discovery year, um, sometimes there is a feeling of I really need to fit in. Like I remember, I remember at my university. I remember, I remember I would hear stories like the rugby team. And to get inside the rugby team, you'd have to do some weird like entry kind of stuff, like really weird. I'm like, why would anybody do that? But this is the reason. This is like how you get into the rugby team. Like there's like things you have to do to get in. You know what I mean? Things that normally you'd be like, I would never like to do that, but it's like that's like a very like a very bizarre example, but it's a thing that comes to mind, and I think that's sometimes the feeling at university is that I've got to be X, Y, and Z to fit in. What I would say to university is often so diverse that really, no matter who you are, there's probably going to be someone who's going to be your clique. That's like you don't actually have to pretend to be somebody that you're not. It's such a diverse place that there's going to be someone like you. So you don't actually have to do things that you don't want to do to fit in. You sometimes feel like that. For example, especially if you're living out, everyone in your dorms is doing something. You're a bit left out now. Like maybe like the sport example is a nice example. Sometimes some of these sport teams have like an entry, like an entry thing to like get in, and they're very, very bizarre things. And so like sometimes like there's almost a very physical entry point to fit in. And what I would say is university is time that you discover yourself and don't be afraid to discover yourself and don't be afraid to not fit in. And what I would say is the most important thing that you're doing when if you're in your journey is really discovering Allah. And if that's what you achieve in terms of your journey, then alhamdulillah, glad tidings to you. Whether you fit in or not fit in, whether you manage to find yourself a good friendship group or not. But you will, inshallah, especially if you're searching for that. So rather than trying to fit in, maybe have a think about who do I want to be. Once you find out who you want to be, then you can find the kind of people that are that person that you want to be, rather than trying to fit in terms of um, a place that maybe that's not someone that you want to be.
Hmm. I don't know. I feel like a lot of Muslim students, when they come into university and they want to fit in, they want some sort of healing in terms of like that gap, that social gap. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of a quote by Ibn Mas'ud, rahimahullah, about Allah doesn't place your healing in that which He has forbidden for you. So, fitting in with those friends that because you want to fill in that social gap, you associate with those friends who are maybe not Muslim, maybe drink,
Mm.
etc. That's not going to be a direct source of healing. Ultimately, it's serving Allah, and you have to think about how you can associate yourself with people who allow you to serve Allah and allow that to flourish, and that's what's going to fill that hole. Because temporarily, sure they might do, but you're never going to have full fulfillment, and that goes back to the fact that Islam is what fills in that hole ultimately. And those
Yeah,
people
yeah,
that you surround yourself with is what's going to help nourish that as well.
definitely, 100%, 100%. And you're not gonna, especially for first years, maybe it's more advice to first years people that's starting off. It probably the first bunch of people you sit with probably aren't actually going to be your friendship group.
Hmm.
I remember when I first started university, it took me a while to find out, who's your crew, and your crew can kind of adapt over time. But one thing that is nice about university, and this is something to take really, really seriously. All the way up until university, often your friends, unless in very like rare circumstances, often your friends are not going to be with you for life. Even though you might think so, everyone thinks like that. Like when you're in first school, you feel like, "Is my friend for life?" Then your next school, you realize actually they're not my friends. Then high school, you're my friends for life. In sixth form, you're thinking, and then it doesn't actually happen. At university, it actually does. That often the friends that you make at university actually are your friends for life. Not all of them, but some of them will be. So not to sound dramatic, but you're basically picking the first line of your janazah in terms of the friendship group that you're making. So have that in mind more than ever in terms of university, that these might well be your friends for life. So choose wisely. Choose wisely. Which kind of group of people do you want to be with? In terms of, and you should aspire, to try and be in the best company you can possibly be in.
And I think that's a very good perspective to say that long-term sort of perspective.
Yeah.
It's always like, as you said, with primary and secondary, we think we have friends for life, and it's sort of like we want to have friends for life. We don't want we want to be in that bubble. We don't want to stray away from that. But
Correct.
with
Yeah.
university, you've got to factor in so many other things because you're an
Yeah.
adult now. You're not just a child who can go to school and then come back and not really face any social repercussions. It's sort of like you need to devote more time to them. So you rather want to devote more time to people who can increase your iman rather than people who would distract you from it.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, inshallah. So, how should Muslim students cope when there aren't many Muslims in their class? So they want to be in that environment, but there just aren't many Muslims. And I know, I guess one answer to that is the ISOC, but let's see if we can try and answer it outside
Yeah,
of that as well, inshallah.
that's fine. So, what I would say is, especially university, and this is definitely the case, is that you often can develop great friendships with people who aren't necessarily in your class. And I guess that's the difference between like, your sixth form and schooling life and university is that university is far more dynamic, far more like intermixed than a simple these people in my class. Um, and I think that's the case for everybody in the sense that everybody I know has made good friends with people of people who are not inside their class. And that is because university is just number one. Often you don't even often have one class. That's normally the case. With certain degrees might be, but generally speaking, you normally have like a class, and then you like you mix with that as a subject for those lessons, and you mix with that subject for those lessons, and we cross over with whatever subjects in those lessons, and so it's kind of it's all a bit of a jumble anyway. But then even outside of that, whether you're interested in sports or whatever kind of club you're going to be part of, they're going to be people who aren't studying the same degree as you. Not only that, you often find you actually can make friends with people who do the same degree of you in different years. Back in sixth form, it's almost socially, reprehensible to be friends with someone who's in a different year to you. It's like you would never ever find yourself friends with someone in the year above. That would never happen.
Mm.
At least I never experienced that in
Yeah, yeah.
school. And you never be friends with the person in the year below you. It's like, why be friends with that guy? We're not in the same year. University's not like that. It's not like that at all. You can be friends with people who are like 7 years older than you, and it's completely socially normal. So you're not kind of restricted in that sense, and there isn't those kind of social restrictions that I've got to be friends with people in my class. You don't have to be friends with people in your class. You can have, and some of my closest friends, definitely in my early years, in university, weren't people who were in my class. Later on, that might become the case, but yeah, I think that the social restrictions in university are not like before that.
Mm. And it's weird, I guess, but like it's interesting that when you make friends in university and they are older than you don't really see that as well. You might
Yeah.
notice it in primary or secondary school,
Yeah.
but it's something that's a lot more normal and
Yeah, yeah,
beneficial as well in the university
yeah,
context for someone who can get hukams, someone you can find wisdom from as well, especially if they're a
yeah.
Muslim. Some people that you can learn from. I think it's really beneficial. Maybe even a recommendation to try and branch yourself out outside of your year to maybe through the ISOC, talk to the
100%.
students who are in the elder years, make
Definitely,
friends with them, etc. Associate yourself
definitely.
with that circle.
100%. I mean, it's not just a Imani tip, it's a tip probably to pass your degree as well.
Mm.
Is when you make friends with people. I remember back in my day, we used to make friends with the people in the year above, and they'd give us like past papers and tell us like, do this, do that, do that distinction, don't do that distinction. So it's definitely like a university hack to find people who have done what you've done that in the years above you. And like I said, like you have just an open common room, and it's very normal. And this is like the beginning of the real world, right? Like when in the real world, when you get like a proper job, not everyone in your job is at the same age. You have people who are like old to be your grandma, who are working with you, and that's people that you need to kind of work with. So, um, what I would say is. University is the beginning of that, so it's completely fine to make friends with people in years above you and benefit from them. Yeah, not even like as if like a wise uncle, but even like you've done what I've done 2 years ago. What should I look out for? What book should I remember a good example, like a very practical example. I remember when I was in first year, they would give us all these like director study books. These are your lectures, and these are all the director study books. When you're a first year, you think you actually have to read that stuff. Then you go and ask like an overview. They say, I forget all that stuff. Just look at your lectures, for example, right? And you just saved yourself 60 quid because you didn't buy all those director study books. I know that's a silly example, but it just goes to show you that when you've got to ask someone who's gone through it, then they can help you a lot in terms of you don't actually need to buy that
Mm.
stuff. The only thing they really care about is lecture notes. That's just like if you're really interested in the subject. Okay, if you're interested, fine, go buy it. But someone who's been there can give you some practical advice. So yeah,
Alhamdulillah, university is a perfect environment for that. The people, you're
yeah,
all grouped together. It's not sort of like, even though you are first year, it's not like you're in first year. Like you've got a whole different building and you're this side of the
yeah,
university.
yeah,
Everyone's intermingled. So it's a
yeah,
very easy place to make those sort of friends as
yeah,
well,
100%,
beyond
100%.
like the Islamic perspective.
Yeah, 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 100%.
Okay, this one's going to be a bit more of a, I guess, political, you could say, maybe question. How can young Muslim male students preserve their masculinity and how to be a strong masculine man in an environment where it is seen as taboo?
That's uh, that's an interesting question, man. I don't know. I was ready for that question.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Interesting masculinity. Look, I think part of it, and this is maybe a part of the answer, maybe not the best answer, but I think part of it is talk about again this idea of responsibility. That I think, this is, I guess, is more in terms of maturity and adulthood, and as part of that is masculinity for a male, is in terms of this idea of taking responsibility, like being a man, in terms of starting to be responsible for yourself rather than thinking that your parents are going to be the one responsible for you. Your parents aren't responsible for you. At your university, you're responsible for yourself now. So I know I'll give you I'll give you an Islamic example. We'll give other examples. Islamic example. Sometimes with zakat, you always say, "Oh, my parents sort it." What do you mean your parents sort it? You're 18, 19, 20 years old. What do you mean your parents sort it? You don't even know what this is. My parents sort it out for me. Be a man. Take responsibility for your own responsibilities and understand like what's being responsible for you because so I think part of it is being responsible, and that's part of the university journey anyway, in terms of you start to have a lot more responsibility, and as part of that it's understanding you got to be a man in certain situations, and there's probably different situations where that can come, and it takes time for you to kind of really step up and do that. I think maybe we can link it to what we said earlier in terms of part of like being a real man is not being such a um not just doing anything to fit in. Yeah. Just caving at any type of pressure because you have to fit in. Someone who's a man is someone who is, they have some own self-respect, in the sense that, oh, but they told me I have to do X, Y, and Z to enter the rugby team. You're a man. Make your own decision. Don't make someone else make that decision for you. Have some self-respect for yourself. Or because someone told you to do something, doesn't mean you have to do it. So, you've got to kind of stand on your own 2 feet and sometimes push back if someone's going to do something. So I think those are some kind of initial thoughts that come to mind.
And I think this question came from a student in the social sciences. So I'm guessing they're coming from the perspective of they're probably going to the lectures and they're being one of the lectures are probably about some theories or some ideas that may not necessarily correlate or even conflict with Islam, when it comes to politics or society, etc. So I guess it's perhaps them questioning should they try and combat that? Should they try and you know, how should they deal with that, I guess?
So how do they do with what? As in the social sciences in terms of what, sorry?
So, like, for example, it could be on, I don't know, democracy, the issue of democracy. Is it something that they should go like full Sharia in terms of their like battle against it or debate against it, or should they take a
Ah,
step back and have a more like, I don't know, mediated response, I guess.
so look, every single situation and decision requires wisdom. Yeah.
Mm,
And wisdom dictates that you say the appropriate thing in the appropriate time. Um, being, masculine doesn't mean that you're reckless. That's not what being a man is. It doesn't mean that you're reckless in terms of the things that you say and the things that you do. It means that you're principled, but you're also wise in the way how you're coming across. So, I think, with everything, like wisdom will dictate what exactly you say at what point. But I think having a backbone is important. That doesn't mean that you're reckless. It just means that you are, I think principled in terms of what you're doing and saying and acting.
I think big part of that is also patience. As your iman is growing, you start to have more patience towards these ideas, and you start to understand the context, especially if you are in the social sciences. It's all about having that nuanced approach, and we see it like today with, for example, like Dili Hussein. I think he talked about it when he's having his
Okay.
debates. He always tries to talk to it from the perspective, or tries to understand the perspective of the person he's debating, try to understand their
Sure.
criticisms, their context,
Yeah.
etc. So I think it's really
Yeah.
important that we try and have that when it comes to these sorts of issues. Try and
Sure.
understand their way of thinking and not try and, I guess it's let going of that need to impose yours as well.
Yeah.
So having
No
that
doubt.
hikmah
No
ultimately.
doubt. No doubt. No doubt.
Okay. This question's about, I guess it's more politics. How can Muslim students be proactive in university politics? So, for example, protesting or debating with the far right.
I mean, I'm not sure if I'm not going to ask in terms of how can students get more involved in politics. Partly because my university time was never really that political, apart from an Islamic lens. So I was very much involved in, call it like Islamic politics, in the sense of the politics of where we're going to play Jum'ah and battling with the university and the SU and like speaker forms and why is that person banned, why is he not banned and whatever and things like that. Of course, with what was happened in Gaza over the past
Mm,
few years, that is something that absolutely requires an activism part, and it was actually very nice to see, very relieving to see, not just in the UK but across the world in terms of that activism mindset that Muslim students had, and you saw actually the impact of it. The impact was actually huge. It was huge in terms of the impact, and I think often these kind of efforts typically do come from university students. I don't actually know why that is. I can't really put my finger on it as to why does it, but it often does actually start there. It often does often start there, whether that be that like we saw in the Gaza things in terms of tents and or universities across the
mm,
world that people were kind of like, staying in tents and things like that. So I think, that's it's so needed. It's so inspiring. And I guess it's one of those situations where, often young adults are leading the way in terms of things that are extremely important. Yeah.
100%. Okay, and now for the final question. I think it's a very good summarizing, good question to round off this interview, inshallah. So, in the context of a university, or not a university student, a student who's about to go into university, they've just looked on UCAS, they've been accepted for that offer into whatever university. Now they're starting to feel nervous. What is one piece of advice you would give to that upcoming university student who's nervous about starting?
Okay. Nice. Nice. Um, I guess I'll reiterate the advice that that I was given, which was uh, don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. When you get there, inshallah, there's going to be some great people who are also going to be in a situation that you are going to be in, and also potentially, so many people that I talk to from so many different backgrounds. I'm talking about international students to people who come from different cities, and they always say to me the same thing. They said, I feel like I have a family at university. Like I feel like at university, like I'm part of a family of brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever it might be. So I would say, I understand why you might be nervous because this is going to be a huge step and a huge change in terms of things. But often we are scared of change. We're scared of something new, and it's only when we're in that new thing we realize actually this is great. And so many people find that university time to be one of the best times in terms of their life. So I would say, find your family, and inshallah there's a family for you. And I think your role is to make sure that you pick the right family in terms of university times because you really do feel like you're part of a unbelievable family bond when you go to university. So don't worry, inshallah. You're going to soon find your family. Just make sure that you look for the right family once you're going to be there. And many people have trod this path before you, and many people have been extremely successful. I don't just mean successful in a dunya sense. I mean successful in terms of discovering who they are and making a good transformation in terms of their life. So strive to be like that. Strive to be like that. And like any kind of big event in your life, realize that if Allah is with you, there's no reason to be afraid. When Musa alayhi salam has been tasked with the biggest task of his life, in terms of to go to Fir'aun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Harun, and Musa says he's scared. Being scared and nervous is a normal kind of feeling. Musa says, Inni akhafu. Yeah. Musa is a prophet of Allah. He says, I'm scared in terms of this next step of my journey. This seems extremely. Now, you're not going to go find a pharaoh who's going to chop your head off when you go to university, but we're also not Musa. So the things that kind of make us nervous and scared is it's far less. But the fear of fear and nervousness is normal. Is normal. Allah, He says to Musa and Harun, لا تخافا إنني معكما أسمع وأرى. Allah says to Musa and Harun, don't worry, don't be scared. I am with you, hearing and seeing. Now, so if we are close to Allah, if we have that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then realize that Allah is with us. And if Allah's with us and Allah sees and He hears, you have no reason to be afraid. You have no reason to be nervous. And just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Musa and Harun, لا تخافا, don't be worried, don't be scared. It's a natural reaction. But when you actually realize that Allah is with you, then that empowers you and that gives you in terms of strength to battle any type of fear that you're, whether it's going to university, whether it's going to any other big event. then be with Allah. Be with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will assist you in that, inshallah.
I think a quote to echo that as well is by Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, who said that the one who bears in mind the fact that Allah is watching his thoughts and his heart, Allah will protect him from falling short in what he does both in secret and openly. Many
Very
times
nice.
we see as we're going into university that it's an obstacle. It's the mindset that we've had to primary school, secondary school. It's like X amount of years, I'm going to be done with it. I think with university, you need to have that more opportunistic perspective. Don't see university as an obstacle, but an opportunity to make friends, an opportunity to increase your iman, and an opportunity to further your career prospects, etc. Because I guess secondary and primary is mandatory, you don't really see the benefit of it in terms of it's just handed to you. Whereas with university, you've had to work for it. You've had to work for it through your secondary and through your sixth form. And now it's your time to make the most of it as well. It's going to define, well, not really define, I guess, in today's perspective, but be a big part in your future and your careers, etc. So it's really important that you make the most of it as well. And I guess my advice to a university student who is nervous is try to be, even if it's not within your nature, try and be as open as you can. Attend as many events as you can. For example, as a Muslim in the ISOC, go to the welcome event. The university committee, etc., the ISOC committee are very open. They are students themselves, so they know how you're going to be feeling. Think of it like this: you're not the only one that's nervous there. Everyone else there is nervous. Everyone there, because they're nervous, they're very open to making friends. You know, later down in university, when people already have friend groups, they're going to be a lot more closed in. But at the start of university, everyone's very open to making friends. So it's a lot more easier in that way, in that perspective, to make friends. So that's the most opportune moment for you to try and do that. So I guess it's just maximizing that first few weeks, whilst all the other students are clubbing and stuff, you could be making those meaningful relationships with students. So I think that's my advice I would give.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, Jazakallah Khair, Sheikh. Today's interview, inshallah, will be very impactful for both upcoming and current university students as well. And may Allah reward you for your efforts, for taking the time to
Ameen.
do this interview. And inshallah, if there is a topic that you think is meaningful for the youth to talk about, inshallah, we can have you back as well.
Allah barik fikum. Jazakumullah khairan. Much appreciated. Thanks for having me on the channel.
No worries at all. And inshallah, if you, the viewers and the audience, if you found it beneficial, inshallah, be sure to both share this video, share any clips from it as well, any shorts, Instagram reels, etc. And to make sure that most or as many people can benefit as well. Jazakallah khairan and assalamu alaikum.